in the portion of Noso, the Torah speaks about, it refers to something as truma. Truma literally means the first tithing, which is given to the Kohen. The Torah says all the truma, which is from the sanctified portions of the grain, the produce, must be brought to the Kohen. So Rashi cites the Midrash. We have the Bikurim, the new fruits that we begin bringing on Shavuos, the grain, the fruits of Israel, which are the first fruits that ripen, are brought to the Kohen. A declaration's made in the Temple Mount, the Beis Hamikdash. So Rashi cites the Midrash, Vish es Kedoshav lo yiyu. It says, each man, Kedoshav, that's sanctified, should be for him. So he cites the Midrash Godo, Isha Kedoshav lo yiyeh. Let's say a person withholds the tithes that he's supposed to give to the Kohen, to the Levi, doesn't give them. Lo yiyeh maisros. Factually, his field will produce what he was supposed to give away the 10th, rather than giving away the 10th and retaining 90%, all his field will produce is the 10th that he was supposed to give away. Sof shein sodeu. It will only produce 1/10 of what was meant to be given away, so you will no longer retain 90%. And then following this portion, the Torah speaks about the suspected adulteress. That a man who's his wife goes astray. She doesn't necessarily commit adultery, but in terms of her behavior is not in conformance what how a wife should behave. She's flirtatious with another man. Her husband forewarns her that their relationship is a relationship of exclusivity, and she goes and he warns her not to seclude herself with this man. And she goes and defies his warning, and she goes behind closed doors in seclusion, and there's a question what actually took place. Did she commit adultery? Did she not commit adultery? So the Torah tells us that until it's verified what happened, she's not permitted to the husband. Why? Because since there is very strong circumstantial evidence that since she defied his warning, after he had forewarned her in the presence of witnesses, and despite that, she goes and defies his warning and secludes herself with another man long enough that they could have committed adultery, the Torah says we treat her like an adulteress until it's proven that she did not commit adultery. Now, how do you prove it? There are no witnesses. We have no idea what went on behind closed doors. So the Torah says there's a procedure. And this procedure is a procedure which it only functions within the context of miracle. The husband has to be agreeable to continue relationships. He takes his wife to the Kohen. And the Torah has a prescription. It's called the prescription of the Writ of the Adulteress. And what he does, he takes the portion in the Torah which discusses all the laws pertaining to adultery, which has the name of God, and he obliterates it into the water. But before he obliterates it into the water, this Writ of the adulteress, he goes, and of course she claims her innocence, because if she admits that she committed adultery, there's nothing to talk about. This procedure will not be applied. But she's claiming her innocence. And the Kohen adjures her and tells her, if you committed adultery at any time, whether it's this time in the past or whatever it may be, this water, and she takes note that she did not commit adultery. And if she did commit adultery, this water will have devastating effects on her. Literally, she will die as a result of drinking that water. Her body will swell, all her arteries will burst, and literally she will be dismembered. She will die a death which is so grotesque, it's difficult even to look at the remains of what she looks like afterwards. But if she's innocent and she did not commit adultery, it will have just an opposite effect. That if she was infertile, she'll become fertile. If she had difficulty giving birth, she'll give birth easily. If she had ugly children, she will have beautiful children, just to the contrary. But this is the procedure. So the Torah juxtaposes the portion of the suspected adulteress to the man who withholds bringing the tithes to the Kohen. What is the value of this juxtaposition? Because juxtaposition is juxtaposed in the particular context to draw a lesson. What's the lesson we have to learn? So Rashi cites the Midrash. If you withhold the gifts, the portions from the Kohen, you don't give him his bikurim, the new fruits. You don't give him the first tithe. Chayecho. God says, I swear on your life, if you don't come to the Kohen in good times, for good reasons, you're going to come to the Kohen for bad reasons. Lavi lo isasota. You're going to have to bring your wife for this verification process, determine whether she committed adultery or not. On face value, it sounds very enigmatic because the husband withholds the tithes from the Kohen, which he should give to him happily. Firstly, it's an obligation. Secondly, it's rightfully his. But if you withhold it and you don't visit the Kohen to give him what's rightfully his, you're going to have to visit the Kohen for not good reasons. Your wife will go into seclusion with a man. It'll be questionable whether she committed adultery, and you'll be forced to come to the Kohen for this verification process. So the most obvious question is, if the husband is a bad man, he's a dishonest person, he withholds something that he has no right to withhold, why should the wife become a victim of his greed? Because the husband is greedy, not willing to give what's rightfully the Kohen's. God says, if you don't come to the Kohen in good times, you're going to come to the Kohen in bad times. How do we understand this? Right? Why should the helpless woman be a victim because of the husband's level of greed? That's not the question. We find that Yaakov Avinu, he had fled from his brother because his brother vowed to kill him because he had taken the birthright. He hadn't seen his brother for nearly 36 years. And he sends a gift, he prays to God, he prepares for war. And what happens is, there's the showdown between him and Esav, and Yaakov runs towards Esav. He prostrates himself 7 times, stands up. Somehow, this level of submission which Yaakov demonstrated touches a soft spot in Esav's heart. They embrace. Esav cries. And he looks around and he says, it wasn't necessary to send this valuable gift, so on and so forth. And Yaakov presents his family. He presents the maidservants with their children, Leah with her children, and Rachel, the last, with her children, with her son, Yosef. Binyamin wasn't born yet. Benjamin was not born yet. So Rashi immediately makes it a point. Where was Dinah? The children of Leah presented, but Dinah was not there. Only the sons. Dinah was not there. That was the daughter of Leah. So Rashi cites Chazal that he had hidden Dinah in a box because he was concerned that if the eye of Esav would come upon Dinah, he may want to take her as a wife. And under no circumstance would Yaakov agree that Dinah should marry Esav. So rather than creating a confrontation with Esav, he concealed her in a box. So the Midrash says that because Yaakov had denied Esav, Dinah, as a wife, which may have made a difference in Esav's life, because you denied her to a circumcised person, she will fall prey to an uncircumcised person. And that's what we find when Yaakov had finally come to Canaan and he purchased a property in Shechem. the prince of Canaan saw Dinah when she went out to see the women of that area, and she caught his eye, and he raped her. He raped her, and he sodomized her, and that's the whole story where Yaakov's children went, and they destroyed the city of Shechem. So the Midrash says, because you denied your daughter from a circumcised person, she will fall prey to an uncircumcised person. Again, same question. Because Yaakov did the wrong thing. That means Dinah's daughter has to be a victim. Has to be victimized by Shechem, the prince of Canaan. The same question. Because the Kohen is being denied the tithes which are rightfully his due to the greed of the husband. The wife falls victim and she becomes an adulteress. Because Yaakov failed, his daughter Dinah should be a victim to be raped by the prince of Canaan. Another example. We read in the Torah that if a person takes a stone and he throws it into a forest, and without thinking that there may be a person walking in that forest, and he hits the person with the stone and kills the person. So that a person's killed due to his level of irresponsibility, lack of thinking. So he's not considered held accountable that he deserves to be put to death, but he killed a person due to his lack of behaving responsibly. So the Torah tells us if that should happen, if that stone would hit a person and kill a person, he must flee to a city of refuge. And he must stay in the city of refuge until the Kohen Gadol passes away, the high priest passes away. That means he could be incarcerated in the city of refuge for the rest of his life. Because if the high priest doesn't pass away in his lifetime, he dies in the city of refuge. And if he should leave the confines of the city of refuge, the Goel Adam, the revenger of the blood of the person who was killed, has a right to kill this murderer who killed his relative inadvertently. That's called avenging the blood of the relative. And the Torah says that being incarcerated during this period of time, that's an atonement for this act of irresponsibility. That's the law. Now, the question is like this. If a man chooses to behave irresponsibly, why should that man be a victim? If the man was meant to die, so why the one who threw the stone, were never meant to kill him, why should he have any level of liability? And if he wasn't meant to die, why did he die? So how do we understand it? If God wanted the man to die and this man was just an agent, by throwing the stone, so if that's the fact, if that is the fact, there should be no culpability to the one who threw the stone. And if the man is not meant to die, so how could this man's action of irresponsibility take an innocent person's life where he wasn't meant to die? So how do we reconcile this? So let's understand. The Talmud tells us that a person who walks by a wall that could fall over, and he puts his life in jeopardy, and it doesn't fall over, the wall does not fall over, and he doesn't die, and he's only alive due to miracle, and actually he causes that his merits should be depleted. Because a miracle doesn't happen by itself. It happens only because you have merits, sufficient merits that protected you to merit that miracle. So therefore, if you walked under the wall because you acted irresponsibly, so what happens when you walk there? You violated the law. A Jew has to preserve his life. Putting yourself in a position where you actually put your life in jeopardy, you create what we call a prosecution. You create a prosecution on yourself. God gives you a life. He endows you with a life. He protects you. How do you not behave responsibly? Acting and behaving irresponsibly, that causes actually that one's record should be prosecuted. You must think you're worthy of some kind of miraculous divine protection. Let's see what your record is all about. I mentioned many times the name of the Ramchal, that what is the attribute of mercy? What's the attribute of justice? Attribute of mercy means nobody's record is perfect. All our records are far from perfect. But mercy means as long as our record is not being prosecuted by the prosecutor, who's Satan, we're in safe territory. But if a person causes that his record should be prosecuted because he behaves as holier than thou, God says, Satan says, who's this person that he's holier than thou? Let's see how perfect his record is. So the moment that record is prosecuted, is examined, is audited, that's the attribute of mercy. But otherwise, that's the attribute of justice. Otherwise, we merit the attribute of mercy. The Gemara tells us, the Talmud tells us, if a person prays the Amidah, and he prays it with tremendous kavanah, intent, and he feels that because he prayed so well, so intensely, God owes it to him that God should respond to his supplications. He feels that way. That means he feels God owes it to him. If the person has that sense of himself that God owes it to him, that means you really must be special. If you must be special, what does that cause? It causes an immediate audit on your record. The moment the record is audited, this activates the attribute of justice on that person. You want to stay below the radar, act humbly, I'm not worthy. It's your graciousness. If you respond, fine. But if you feel that God owes it to you because you prayed so well with such intensity, that activates the prosecution, the auditor, and the audit, that's the attribute of justice. That's the concept. So now let's understand. We said in the Modim, in the Amidah, we thank God for all the miracles and the wonders that take place continuously. God provides on a continuous basis miracles and wonders and kindness continuously. What is it? If every one of us has a checkered record, and really you deserve to be compromised and to be punished, and despite that, God does not allow it to happen. God protects you. Satan comes to prosecute, he silences him continuously. And we do things beyond the pale that God should not provide that mercy. But he does. Providing that mercy and providing the goodness despite our shortcomings, these are miracles, ongoing miracles. So we merit miracles because God provides miracles, otherwise the world wouldn't exist. So despite the prosecution, God says he silences the prosecution. We find by the sons of Aaron that on the day the Mishkan took on a permanent status, which was the eighth day of the Mishkan, when Aaron and his children were installed as Kohanim, Nadav and Avihu, they went and they took an alien fire and brought a fire. And God struck them down and they were killed on that day. On the eighth day of the Mishkan, Aaron's two children, Nadav and Avihu, were killed. Why were they killed? They were killed because they brought Azorah. They brought this alien fire. However, it says explicitly in the Torah that we know that Aaron participated in the sin of the golden calf. He gathered the gold. Although his intention was altruistic, he wanted to delay the building of the altar for idolatry, and he never gave any credence to the golden calf. But because he was involved in the process, he deserved that all four of his sons should die. All four sons should die. That would have been the punishment to Aaron. However, Moshe's supplications annulled 50% of the decree, and only two of his sons died, not all four sons died. So the most two special sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, which were the elder sons, they died. Moshe's supplication and no 50% of decree. So the question is obvious. Firstly, the Talmud tells us that if a person's an adult does not die because of the sins of his father. It says, Lo yumsu avos al bonim. A child is not punished for the sins of his father. So because Aaron failed with the golden calf, what relevance does it have to do with his adult children? Everybody's judged on his own record. The father's negative record, whatever the claims are, has nothing to do with the children. But yet it says that if not for Moshe's supplications, all four of his sons would have died. That's the first question. The second question, which I asked, was, it says explicitly the reason why they died was either because they brought an alien fire, because they should have consulted with Moshe, which they did not, or they had drunk wine and they officiated in the semi-drunk state. That's why they died. Not because their father had been involved in the golden calf. So how do we reconcile all these questions? So over there, the Orach Chaim HaKodesh explains, says something phenomenal. There's a verse in Samuel, in Shmuel HaNavi, the prophet says, Ragle Chasidav Yishmor. God watches the feet of those who are devoutly pious. What does that mean? He watches the feet of those who are devoutly pious. So Rabbeinu Bachi explains, let's say a person is a professional runner, a professional athlete. Over time, as careful as you are, a person does not have 100% cognizance. The person will actually have some kind of sports injury. Because since the topography of the ground is not always flat and there are certain curves, it's inevitable over time, the person will have some kind of sports injury. However, a chosid, ragli chasidim yishmor. God watches over the feet of the chasidim. Those who are devoutly pious, scrupulously pious, humanly, we have human error. But those who are scrupulously pious, Hashem, there's divine protection that protects them, that they always have absolute clarity. They're always protected not to make the mistake. That's Ragle Chasidim Yishmor. He watches over the feet of the Chasidim. It was a known fact. The Chassam Sofer, his name was Ramosha Schreiber, Ramosha Sofer. He lived in the mid-19th century, passed away then. He wrote thousands and thousands of responsa, thousands. He was World War IX, the Sizer in the 19th century. He never, ever retracted a decision. He never made a mistake. Ramosha Feinstein, Zech Tzarek Livrocha, wrote thousands of responsa. Ramosha never, ever retracted a ruling. People disagreed with him, and he always proved why his position was the cogent position, was the correct position. How could you always be right? There's a certain element of human error. To be 100 for 100, 10,000 for 10,000, always right, how's it possible? The answer is, these people merited certain divine clarity, divine protection, that they should always see it right. Whether it was the Chassam Sofer or it was Ramosha Feinstein. Aaron HaKohen, being the equivalent of his brother Moshe, he was chosen by God to be the high priest. He was a very holy man. We can't even relate to his dimension of holiness. He definitely should have had Ragle Chasidav Yishmor. God watched over him. There was divine protection with clarity. Now, if Aaron's children would die, it would cause Aaron tremendous grief and pain. So the merit of Aaron should provide clarity to his children. None of you made a mistake. They should have consulted with Moshe. They did not consult. They felt it wasn't necessary. But that mistake was a life-threatening mistake. Because of that, they died. But why didn't God give them clarity that they should not make the mistake? Because if they die, it's going to cause Aaron grief. Aaron's going to have tremendous grief if his two sons die. So why did God give clarity? So Aaron's children only would have merited that divine clarity due to Aaron's merit. But since Aaron himself deserved that level of grief because he participated in the golden calf, therefore his children did not have that clarity. Because they did not have that clarity, and they themselves in their own right were worthy to have that divine intervention not to allow them to make the mistake. Therefore, they made the mistake. That was their own human error. And therefore, so why did they die? Because they didn't consult with Moshe. They brought the alien fire. Or they drank a certain small amount of wine, which disqualified them from officiating. So when we say that Moshe's supplication annulled 50% of the degree, that means two of his sons had clarity that they wouldn't make such a mistake. But the two most special of his sons, they did not merit that clarity due to Aaron's worthiness. And as a result of that, they made the mistake. But why did they die? They died on their own accord. It's not because of the sin of Aaron. The sin of Aaron denied the children that they should be beneficiaries of Aaron's divine protection, that they should not make the mistake. That's the understanding. So that's how we reconcile. They were adults. Why did they die? Because they sinned personally. But what it means, because Aaron had sinned with the golden calf, he deserved that level of grief, and therefore his merit did not protect them. So that they died was on their own accord. That's why they died. But it was due to Aaron's participation in the golden calf. His children did not merit protection because Aaron deserved that level of grief. That's how the Orach Chaim HaKadosh explains the incident with Aaron and his children. So if not for Moshe's supplication, all four of his children would have died. Why? Because the other two would also made some kind of grave mistake, which would have cost them their life. So the merit of Aaron provided protection to his two lesser sons, but it did not provide protection to his elder sons, and therefore they made the mistake, and that mistake cost them their lives. That's how the Orach Chaim HaKadosh explains this understanding, how he reconciles all these issues. Okay? Now, we read that when a man marries a woman is considered the lost article of the husband. Every soul, you have a male soul, you have a female soul. The wife complements and brings the husband's soul to a level of completion. That's what it does. So the wife is always a beneficiary of the merit of the husband. So the husband's merit protects the wife on many levels. I'll give you an example. A woman is walking the street and somebody notices her. So you say, men notice women. They're attracted to women. But even he notices her, but it didn't draw any attention to the woman that she'd have any interest in him. Because she has a very secure marriage and she's committed to her husband, she wouldn't consider anything. And she totally ignores whatever that advance may be. She's not touched by it. Why? But the man has a certain ability to be very attractive and to make a difference. But somehow it's like water off a duck's back, totally impervious to it. No effect whatsoever. Why? You know why? Because God protected the wife on behalf of the husband. So it's the merit of the husband that protected the wife, that the wife should not fall victim to seduction. What about if the husband is not deserving that his merit should protect his wife? Then now the woman's on her own. She doesn't have the merit of the husband to protect the wife. So now the woman's on her own. Now a man calls attention to her at some level. Now she has to fight with her own demons to be able to suppress, to do the wrong thing. But what happens if she's tempted? Now she's in the clutches of temptation. So why did she fail? She didn't fail because the husband did the wrong thing. She's on her own accord, has to contend with her own issues because she doesn't have the divine protection that would have provided if the husband would have done the right thing. So the husband, if he would have brought the tithes and given them to the Kohen, as he should have, the bikurim, the new fruits, or the first tithe. So if you come to the Kohen in good times, because you address your obligation, responsibility to the Kohen, God says, therefore, in the merit of the husband, his wife has divine protection. Either nobody's going to notice his wife, or his wife is not going to in any way be affected by anybody's advances. So that's due to the merit of the husband. But what happens if the husband is a greedy person and he withholds what he should give to the Kohen? So we say to the man, you will not have divine protection to protect your wife. As a result of that, now your wife's on her own. Now she has to contend with her own levels of temptation. And if she chooses not to succumb, she will not succumb. But if she doesn't choose not to succumb, it's her own decision to fail and to get involved with this other person. That's the understanding. So the Torah is juxtaposing the portion of the person withholding the tithes from the Kohen to the portion of the suspected adulteress, that the only reason why she was subject to temptation was because the husband did not see the Kohen in good times. If he would have addressed his responsibility to the Kohen, he would only come to the Kohen for good reasons, not for this because he has an issue, a problem. Because his merit providing for the Kohen would have provided protection for his wife, that his wife should not succumb, God forbid, to adultery, or to be in a state that she should go into seclusion with another man. Let's talk about Yaakov now. Yaakov is the most special of the patriarchs. Now he realizes he's going to be confronted with Esau, his brother Esau, who was an evil man, and Yaakov despised Esau to his core. And he was concerned that Esau's eye may come upon Dinah, his daughter. He hid her in a box, that he should not notice her. God says you did the wrong thing. You did the wrong thing because you did not allow your brother to see her, because maybe she would have made a difference in his life, who is part of your own pedigree, so to say. It's the offspring of your parents. She will fall victim to a Canaanite prince. What is it? The Torah gives us a background. She goes out and exposes her to the public. She goes, takes a stroll, and she's surveying the area because she wants to see the women of Canaan exactly how they live and how they're doing. When she exposed herself, she was noticed by the prince of Canaan. She did something irresponsible. She put herself in harm's in an area where she could be harmed and hurt badly. She did something which was irresponsible. If she would have done something irresponsible, she would have had the divine protection of her father. Firstly, she would have never come to do that. And if she would have done it, she would have merited divine protection. But because Yaakov was not deserving of the divine protection, he deserved the grief of his daughter being raped. Therefore, now Dinah is on her own. It's up to her to make her own decision. She decided now to go out, but going out was the wrong thing. It's a decision she regretted afterwards, but that was her choice. It had nothing with Yaakov. But if she would have had Yaakov's merit protecting her, she would have a level of clarity not to make that mistake. So again, why was she raped? Due to her own irresponsibility. If she would have had Yaakov wouldn't have been deserving of the grief that his daughter is going to be raped. She would have merited the divine protection of her father, to have that level of clarity. Let's talk about a person throws a stone into a forest, not thinking, and it hits an innocent person, kills the person. So the person who acted irresponsibly, not thinking, he has to flee to a city of refuge for atonement. So we asked, if the man who was hit deserved to die, if that's the case, why does he need atonement? And if he did not deserve to die, so why did he die? That was the question we asked. The answer is very simple. The Torah speaks about a person who commits murder. A person who commits murder. The murderer wants to victimize a person, take another person's life. If the person who's killed is killed, evidently God was an agreement he should die. So if he dies, why is the murderer culpable for committing murder? And if the man is not meant to die, why was the murderer able to commit murder? Just a simple understanding of the facts. This is the answer. Every one of us has a checkered record, far from perfect. The only reason why we're able to merit the attribute of mercy is because God doesn't allow Satan to prosecute that record. Rosh Hashanah is the only time of the year that God allows him to prosecute the record, and we have the merit of the shofar, which silences the prosecution of Satan, not to prosecute the record. Or a person can activate prosecution upon himself. As I said, a person feels after he says the Amidah, God owes it to him. So a person that comes to God with that kind of attitude, you owe it to me, they said, let's see how special you are. So that activates an audit on the record. Once there's an audit, that's the attribute of justice. And the person now is walking on thin ice. And he can be a victim of his own demands. A person who goes and throws a stone and it's about to hit a person, under normal circumstances, a person hit by a stone, in this manner, he dies. What does that mean? It means that this person, he's culpable, not for taking his life. When you threw that stone, you know what the person did? He actually withdrew the attribute of mercy from that person, and he caused that the attribute of justice should drain in on his life, should take his life. So you are responsible for his death for throwing the stone. If you wouldn't have thrown the stone, no, the attribute of justice would have been activated on that person. But now that you chose to behave irresponsibly, not thinking, and you threw the stone inadvertently, you're the cause of the man's death, because under normal circumstances, he would have lived under the protection of the attribute of mercy. But because you chose to throw the stone, and the only thing that could have saved him would have been a miracle, therefore you're the one who's the cause that the attribute of mercy should be withdrawn, and he should succumb due to the attribute of justice. Therefore, the one who throws the stone irresponsibly flees to the city of refuge until the passing of the high priest, and only then is he fully atoned for this irresponsible act, because he caused the death of the person, although the person died on his own accord because of his own negative record. That's how we understand all this. So a person always dies because on his own accord. But the question is, what caused it? Why did he merit sufficient divine protection? Why didn't he merit mercy? All this, it's always the other individual is actually either he's the one who provides the divine protection, or because he's not deserving, he doesn't provide it, therefore the other person falls victim to his own situation. That's the understanding. There's an Orach Chaim HaKodesh over here. It says something phenomenal, profound. We read about the sin of the tree of knowledge. Adam and Eve are in the Garden of Eden. They're naked and they're cohabiting. And the ancient serpent sees them engaging the act of procreation. Chava was a beautiful woman. She was the most beautiful woman who ever existed because she was the handiwork of God. The snake desired her. So what did he do? He did two things. First, he convinced her to eat of the tree of knowledge, which she was told not to by God through her husband. Secondly, it says he seduced her and he came upon her. He penetrated her. This is the snake, the ancient snake of the Garden of Eden. That's what happened. So there was adultery, and there was what? And there was the breach of violating the eating of the tree of knowledge, the fruit of the tree. And God said to Adam that if you should eat of that fruit, death will be pronounced on the world. Until now, you're an eternal being. If you should eat of that fruit, you will be subject to death. Okay? Now, we read on the second day of creation, what did God do? It says he created the sky, and the sky separated between the upper waters and the lower waters. Mayim Elyon and Mayim Tachtonim. That's how to refer to the waters of the upper stratospheres and the water of the lower stratospheres, which is the water on the earth, the oceans, the rivers. And in Chazal, in the Midrash, the waters on the terrestrial levels are referred to as Mayim Bochim. They're referred to as the crying waters. Crying, why are they called the crying waters? So the Midrash tells us, because when God separated between the upper waters and the low waters on the terrestrial levels came and they were crying to God. They said, it's not fair. The waters in the upper stratospheres are associated with you, which is the ultimate location of holiness. By having us on the terrestrial level, we're detached from you. So, therefore, the waters on the terrestrial level are bemoaning their fate. So God says, when we speak of the water doesn't speak. We're talking about these angels, which are the background on anything that exists in existence. They're the ones who are behind the energies which allow things to manifest as they manifest themselves. So God says to the water on the terrestrial level that your situation is even better than the waters on the celestial level. How? Because when the Mishkan will be built and the temple will be built, there's going to be water in the laver. The laver is on the terrestrial level. And when God gave the order to build the Mishkan or the Beis HaMikdash, what did God say? Make for me that sanctuary so I should dwell in your midst. What was the original intention of creation? God to be with the angels or God to be associated with man? Originally, he was supposed to be associated on the terrestrial level, but only because Adam, by eating of the tree of knowledge, putrefied existence, by allowing evil to be part of him, his makeup, God transcended. He removed himself. The first time in the history of existence, when the Shekhinah, divine presence, returned to the terrestrial level, was time of the building of the Mishkan. And that was the original intent of creation. So the divine presence on terrestrial level, that is where God wants to be. So therefore, the water in the Mishkan, in the laver, which the Kohanim, they actually would ritualize their hands and feet before they did the service. That water had a greater level of relationship with God's presence than the water on the celestial level. That's what the water is. Okay? Now, why initially did God detach himself from the terrestrial level? Because of the tree of knowledge. Adam made a tree of knowledge. And why else? Because the ancient snake, who was an incarnation of evil, had infused Chava, the mother of mankind, with the spiritual pollution, which is evil. And God says, because man was putrid due to the tree of knowledge, ingesting it, she and him, and in addition, you have this impurity due to the ancient snake. Therefore, God says, I will not be associated with mankind, not with the man, not with the woman. So God removed himself from this existence. But however, we ourselves at Sinai, we were reinstated to become the equivalent of Adam before the sin. After the sin of the golden calf, we were still retained that classification. But God says, because you sinned with the golden calf, we can't have a direct relationship. It's only through the medium called the Mishkan. So what is the Mishkan? The Mishkan is the location. It's the equivalent of Adam before the sin. And the level of holiness is no less than that level of holiness within the confines of the Mishkan or the temple. And therefore, the water's level of association with God's presence has greater value than it has on the celestial level. What happens now? This woman commits adultery. What is she doing? She's actually repeating and reenacting why God removed himself from this existence. So when she drinks the water of the Writ of the Sota, which is obliterated into the water, and some of the dust of the Mishkan, the floor of the sanctuary, is mixed into that, what happens? Here, finally, the terrestrial level merited God's presence. And because of this woman's misbehavior, what happens? God is removing himself. Here, the consolation to the water is God's presence is associated with it. With the terrestrial level within the confines of Mishkan, God's associated with it. Now, all of a sudden, because of your level of irresponsibility, committing adultery, God is going to repeat what he did thousands of years earlier. As a result of this, a violent reaction, and that's why the woman dies, this grotesque death due to drinking of the water with the writ of the sota, if she committed adultery. Because she is the culprit for driving the divine presence out of this existence. That's how Or Chaim explains it based on this understanding. We find that there was a miracle that took place in the Mishkan and the base of Mikdash. The showbread was baked and was baked before Shabbos, put on the golden table on Shabbos, and a week later, when it was eaten, it was just like hot out of the oven. Out of the oven. It was a miracle. Why did that miracle exist in the Mishkan or in the base of Mikdash? The base of Mikdash or the Mishkan was not subject to physical phenomena, the cause and effect. Its location is the equivalent of pre-sin of Adam. That's its dimension of being. That's its value. So if that's the value, as in the spiritual realm, everything is a constant. When you took it out, oven was hot, a week later, nothing changes. It's still fresh, hot bread when it's eaten by the Kohanim. Because the location itself is a spiritual location. It's like being in the world to come, although we're in this world. That's what it is. It's that is the context of it. So because the woman who commits adultery, she wants to change that equation and actually undermine whatever it stands for. Therefore, there's this violent reaction, and that's the reason why the woman succumbs in this manner, which indicates and confirms that she definitely committed adultery.